Welcome back to Zero Gravity Live, your weightless weekly tech talk show, bringing all the latest discussions right to you. Hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, real quick, just make sure to ring the bell on our channel so you get notifications for all of these events. If you're watching on LinkedIn, be sure to follow our Object First profile. And if you're listening to this in podcast form, now leave us a nice review. And if you're watching us live, we want to know, where are you watching from? So in the chat on whatever platform you're in, please let us know where you're dialing in from today. My name is Anthony Cusimano. I'm your host, and I'm joined by my two bestest friends in the whole wide world, Matt Price and Sterling Wilson. How y'all doing today?
Doing good, brother. How are you?
Doing just fine. How's everything going?
It's good. It's going well. Hey, I think it's time we play a little game. We do this almost every week. So let's take a look at what's going on in your office. Sterling, what do you got in your office today?
Okay. All right. I tried to find something that was good. I tried to find something that would be interesting to sort of share. But before I share, we have to go back a little ways. Please join me sometime around the spring of 2014, 2015.
We're going back.
Oh, yes. Microsoft Windows Mobile was in the game. We had players, we had different form factors, we had choice, and Microsoft had just announced that they were going to come out with a Surface tablet phone that would be the successor to some of these form factors. So, all right, we can kind of skip back and forth right now because we all know that form factor never came. We never got that phone with that cool little flip down keyboard that we could kind of type on, that would kind of be that mini Surface Pro that we could walk around and take phone calls. That never happened. Essentially vaporware. There were some really good concepts, but we didn't get that. What we got was the demise of the Windows mobile operating system. And I know there are a few people with me, Ryan Post, Anton Gostev, but we were hardcore dyed-in-the-wool people. That went away. But what happened in 2020? No, I don't mean COVID, everybody. What happened in 2020 was the answer that Microsoft finally gave us. This is the Surface Duo. And this is what we came out with. It's their idea of a foldable. You've probably heard foldables, in some other form factors with one unified screen. This has a broken screen or a separated screen that you can, cast content across both. You can kind of put content in one. You can use it as a sort of that laptop form factor to kind of type on. Believe it or not, this is a little bit outdated. It has since been discontinued from Microsoft again. So we're going down the same path. But I wanted to share this today because it remains one of my very useful tools, whether I'm on a plane, whether I'm taking notes in a meeting, if I need something with longevity of battery. This is something that I still use every day. You can get one for pennies on the dollar as to what they originally sold for. It's a great multitask. I'll take that dollar, Mr. Price. It's a great multitasking tool. But here's what I really wanted to discuss today. Fast forward to 2024. Porsche has just announced that they are entering the game with a brand new foldable that is going to be the thinnest on the market, using the latest architecture and using the Android system. So I'm going to pause this here. That was what I had to show you in my office. I know that was good, but here's what I wanted to ask you all. Choice in the phone world today. Where did it go? Do you enjoy new things coming out like this? Or let's just be honest. Are the wars over? Has Apple just trumped everybody and we're streamlining simplicity and these are all sort of futile? What do you think?
This is such a good topic, and I pulled out my dollar because you said foldable, and I was like, "Hey, I've got something that's foldable." And you're talking about a Microsoft phone. I was like, "This is about what I would give you for it." So first off, on the Microsoft topic, before we look at this Porsche topic, I'm really curious to see where they go, in the phone game, because, like you said, Sterling, they've kind of dipped their toe in, pulled it out of the pool, dipped it back in, pulled it out of the pool. Like, what are they going to do, with their mobile, tablets and phones? And moreover, like, how does the foldable, market hold up? Because, Samsung's got one out, and there's a lot of these companies that are doing essentially the flip phone that's foldable, as well as the nice large, like what you've got, foldable. How are those screens going to hold up,
Yeah.
over time? And
Yeah.
it reminds me, back when I was not an iPhone user for that 2 week period, let's say, that I was on Android. I had the OnePlus. I think it was the OnePlus S7 or whatever it was, but it
Yeah.
was the McLaren edition. So
Yes.
this is like bringing me back. It's like, here we've got the Porsche edition. I actually had a McLaren edition, but that was still manufactured
Yes.
by OnePlus, which was actually a cell phone manufacturer.
You're right.
I have a feeling that every Porsche enthusiast will be the first one in line to get one of these, regardless if it bombs and craters.
Yeah.
They'll want one to match their Porsche. I probably would.
Yeah.
But to kind of wrap up my thought on this initially, Sterling, is I feel like you've got two schools of thought. The Apple people, like myself, admittedly, you have to buy into the ecosystem. And we've kind of chatted about this in previous shows, but if you do buy into their ecosystem, everything just works. And it's just intuitive. You don't really have to, jump through hoops. You don't have to worry about things crashing generally. And, if you get the watch, if you get the Apple TV, if you get the MacBook Pro, the iPad, the actual Mac Studio, all these different components just work. And I'll give you a prime example. Like with the watch, I don't even have to unlock my computer at all. You used to have passwords, then you had the biometrics with your finger. You've got it on your watch now. If you get in the remote vicinity, your watch will auto unlock your Macs.
Yep.
So it's like that type of ecosystem to me just works and it's seamless. A lot of people like that, but the con to that is there's not really a lot of customization. Back in the day, you could jailbreak phones and do all the things you wanted to do to it, but obviously it wasn't supported. So you're kind of limited in the scope of what they want you to play with or tweak. Then you've got the Android crowd, who literally you can do anything with their phones. Arguably, some of the manufacturers are first to market with some of the tech. I think Samsung was the first one that put like 23 cameras on the back of the phone and said, "Ooh, look at this." And Apple was about 2 or 3 years later when they started adding, better cameras. But the point is, I think it all boils down to the operating system of preference.
Yeah.
I kind of look at Microsoft as in that same bucket as Android. A lot of flexibility, a lot of customization, but with that becomes a lot of potentials for, failures, for crashes, for, code that doesn't exactly work and hasn't been really put through quality control and that type of stuff. So, I think it just depends on which side of the fence you're on. Do you like the flexibility and sometimes have bugs, or do you prefer a more stable, and seamless experience? So, I'm an Apple guy through and through. So that's all I got to say about that.
Solid feedback. What you think, Anthony? What's your take on
Oh, you know me. I've got to always bring like the third option into play. So, I love the idea of more phones, but more than that, I love the idea of just like not just Android, Apple. I would love to see like a Linux phone or, like what does GE's phone look like, right? Like I think more options is always better because competition spurs innovation.
Yeah.
But more importantly than that, I think what we really need to see is sort of a unification on phone protocols, right? Because like, I think one of the big issues today that we run into is, you've got Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay. There's all these different types of ways that you can do things with your phone, but not everything is supported everywhere. And what I'd actually like to see, I think if we had a lot more devices on the market and a lot more options to choose from, suddenly we'd have to sort of unify the way that we interact with these things, standardize protocols for everything. So yeah, I think it's cool that Porsche's got a phone, but like I'd like it way more if they built their own operating system for it. That would have been neat.
Well said. Well said. I've got to say, I'm sort of split between the two camps of Mr. Price and Anthony here, because I really love the idea of being unique. All of my stuff, my bikes I always like to sort of present a uniqueness. So I like to, look or dress things up a little differently than the rest. And so having a different type of form factor can sometimes even start a conversation, which then leads to sort of that information sharing. I do love that. But it's hard to knock Matt's points about everything just working. and simplifying what the tasks are that we need to do versus all the other things where we'd like to spend our time on.
Hey, you know what, Sterling? You said the magic word. So I do want to stop before we get into what's going on in Matt's office. The magic word for the month is simplicity. And you'll notice throughout some of the shows and the topics we talk about over the next 4 weeks, the theme of simplicity recurring over and over again, because it is important. And as we get into some of the topics later today, again, I'll ask us to bring up this point, like, what can simplicity actually do for you? So you did it, Sterling. You introduced us into it. So that's what we're going to roll with for the rest of this.
I'll take it.
But until we get to that, Matt, what's going on in your office?
Yeah, so I'm actually, summoning my inner Cam because I saw Cam was on last week and he brought the Insta 360 to the show. So I have to bring another Insta 360 product.
What is that?
That I've had. Sterling's like, dang it, I hadn't seen this yet. So this is something that I've actually had before my DJI Pocket 3, which I think we showcased the mic kit, a couple weeks back. I'll get around to the Pocket 3 because that's one of my other favorite gizmos. But since Cam brought up the Insta 360 or Insta 360, he had the holder for the phone.
Yes.
So this is what you call the Insta 360. And what I love about this camera, so this is technically an action camera. So this would be comparable to like a GoPro. And you see the giant lens. So this is like a 1-inch lens.
Mm-hmm.
The lens will actually unscrew so you can change lenses. But what's even cooler than that is this entire thing is modular. So this is the battery. We'll set that down for a minute. Then literally the brain separates from the actual lens. So if you look at this, if you can tell, that's the actual touch screen. So it's a real tiny little display where you can control the settings. And you also have a 360 lens. So if we pull this out and connect that, and let me pop the battery back on to kind of show you the full experience.
Are you playing with Legos on stream, Matt?
Right?
Dude, it is straight up like building Legos, because when you put all this together, what I love about this is you've got not only a 360 camera, but you've got a really nice 4K. It shoots 4K 30, not yet 4K 60. But this is the fully assembled 360 camera. So you've got the bubble lens.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Both sides.
That's how it does it.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
how is a box 360? But that's super cool.
It's got the lenses on both sides. And what's really cool about this is you've got one camera that you could arguably take with you, and it mounts in all the the GoPro little mounts.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have this, and it's got an extendable pole, that you can shoot way up. And I've actually used this a couple times during events because you can just stick it up there and record. And what's really awesome for those of you who haven't used a 360 camera, you don't have to worry about angles when you're actually recording. You just stick it up there and hold it and let it do its thing. And it actually, the Insta 360 software is super awesome at stitching all this stuff together. And you can build essentially a spherical video that people can pan around and see everything that you see. Supports live streaming, so you could technically stream from it live, just like the DJI does. But then you get this this is like a 1-inch lens. This is giant for like a, an action camera. So if you're looking for just a high quality,
so is that for speed, or is that meant to be able to get close in on objects?
Both. Because you can turn up, if you don't worry about 4K, and let's say you just shoot in 1080p, I think it goes up to 120, frames.
Yeah.
So you can get some really good slow-mo and really clear, visuals because of that giant aperture that lets so much light in. But I mean, all this and essentially something that'll fit in your pocket. So
that's pretty sick.
I did, and the modularity of it is what I think is so cool. I mean, how many times can you just break apart a camera? Kind of like Anthony's talking about with Legos. It's just like Legos.
I have a buddy of mine who spends a lot of time skiing out in Park City, Sean, if you're watching, and he needs one of those things to be able to capture every single one of those angles when they go in. Anthony, just when I think Matt sits squarely in the simplification, make it all easy for me, he goes and busts out some customization that kind of blows our minds here.
Comes with a remote, all kinds of fancy little gizmos.
Come on.
That's what I was wondering too, is like, the complexity of the product where you can build it together is almost, it is replaced by the simplicity with how easy it is. So it's an interesting way that something that would be incredibly complicated has been made incredibly
well, and
easy to use.
I'll give you guys one more nugget why I think this is so cool. And again, if any of you have used GoPros in the past, so GoPro has, of course, a 360 camera, but GoPro software is not exactly good if you want to leverage the footage to make a shot. The issue is you can create a spherical video real simple. It'll spit it out. You can put it on something like YouTube and you can let people drag around, which sometimes that's cool and good, but other times you don't want that. Other times you want to look at your footage that you took and create a cool video where you control what people see. I'll give you a prime example. You know, Sterling knows that I'm a Jeep guy. So I used to have this thing mounted on the mirror, like actually on my Jeep, on the mirror, when we would go on trail rides off-roading. You know, it's just one location. You never change the view. It's stationary. But when it was done, what's so cool about Insta360 is you use the app that's actually on the phone. Like I could take literally, you know, my iPhone just like this, turn on the app, hit play on the video and hit record. And I can literally do this with my phone.
Oh, wow.
And pan real time in the footage and it saves my motion. So the output export that you create follows where I moved the phone.
All right, that's slick.
And I mean, talk about simplicity. You don't have to open up Final Cut. You don't open up Premiere, none of that stuff. You just write on the app, hit, you know, play, and it follows your tracking. So you knew if there was
this is post-record, right? This is post-record. You're back home, you've looked at what you're recording, and you can actually save as you're
that's it.
Cool. That's
super cool. Yep.
That is super cool. Well, thank you for sharing that, Matt. And, you know, I have a cool thing. I'm going to save it for next week. I just think, you know, we got to save some of the cool, right? We got to spread it out. We don't want to just lay cool on all the time for everyone. So I'll save mine. I'm actually really excited to get into some of our topics today.
Yeah.
So Sterling, introduce us. What are we talking about today that you're bringing us? Every week you blow our minds. So I'm excited. I'm ready to know.
This one is an honest, open. This is going to be more sort of geared towards our gamers, but it really is a much larger topic here today. You know, just recently, Microsoft announced that they were actually exiting out of the console wars. For everybody out there, whether you are a gamer or not, Microsoft makes the Xbox that also goes up against some of the other stalwarts like PlayStation 5 or the PlayStation series and also the Nintendo series. So Microsoft really was that one American sort of player in there. Historically, for everybody as to why this really matters, you know, games which were have large sets of followings, particular games have historically only been available on particular consoles. Want to play that game, have to go purchase the actual console there. But now we're starting to see something a little bit different. What we're starting to see now are the idea that these games are now going to be opened up and shared cross-platform. So does that mean this is the end of the console? Does that mean we are going to a software-driven world where I can go over to Anthony's house with my controller and plug into anything and we can play all of the games in a library? Does the console wars, gentlemen and everyone listening, does the end of the console wars also stifle the creativity, also stifle the competitiveness? Or does this add the simplicity that we all want to just use the best games that are out there?
I wish you didn't bring this up, Sterling, because I'm going to try to keep myself contained to like 20 minutes in my response
I was about to say, please go.
So as cool as this is, I have a little bit of inside scoop. I could color this in a bit. So this is definitely an attempt. COVID has done a number on consoles, just in general, right? Like when the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X came out, that was during COVID, and there was a rush, right? Like you could not get those consoles, whether they were performing well or not. But just in a numbers game, Microsoft has not done as well as the other two have when it comes to console sales this last generation. They haven't been able to pull the numbers, even though they've had some really interesting offerings, a performance console and then sort of a consumer-based console. them bringing games to PlayStation and Switch, and the 4 that they've announced they're bringing over, they're good picks, but it's truly a money motivated factor. Like, I'd love to say that this is like the kumbaya moment where we all get together and feel good about ourselves. But this is actually happening just across the board, except with Nintendo, which is the most just profitable gaming company in the entirety of Japan. So I don't think they really need to play nice. They can do whatever the heck they want. They're Nintendo. But PlayStation's been bringing their games to PC. Microsoft has had a PC forward strategy for the last few years. This is just another effort to essentially sell more copies, which is, you know, the name of the game at the end of the day. I think it's a smart move and a good play. But I will say, as a gamer, as someone who has an office full of gaming crap, the thing that depresses me the most, and maybe this will help, maybe it won't. I'm actually curious to hear what our audience thinks as well. We have not seen the kind of innovation we used to see in games recently. I think Nintendo does a lot of that because of the limitations of their consoles. But I think we're getting into a very samey territory where in the 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit era, those years, those generations, there wasn't a lot you could do. So people had to be really creative in how the games were presented. And now it's all about high fidelity, high graphics, 4K, give me that HDR, and gameplay kind of takes a backseat. Innovation takes a backseat. I would love it if we get past the console idea of more performance, more power, and instead we get into more innovation, more gaminess. But that's just one gamer's opinion. But
Anthony, but before we flip to Matt for his perspective,
a
couple of weeks ago, Matt brought to us the new Apple Vision Pro, I believe it's called, the headset. Does this dovetail into your messaging about we need to sort of think of a new way to game or a new way to present the games when we're going into this sort of virtual reality type of world? Is this going to be better for the consoles, or is this some of the step away?
You know, to my earlier point I made about the phones, the interesting thing about virtual reality and augmented reality, there's not a universal protocol. I think there are a couple open source ones that help. As a VR gamer, there's some really great experiences out there, and some that I've not been able to do because I haven't bought into all of the different platforms, one of which, you know, there's a Meta platform, there's the Steam platform, there's PlayStation has their own platform. So if you're not in all of these spaces, you don't get to experience all the innovation. So I do think that as we change technology, there is more room for it. Absolutely. There's some amazing experiences out there. But again, until we get to this universal, like everyone can access everything, if it wasn't a console war, if it wasn't a virtual reality war, if we got away from platforms and towards those more open protocols, then I think we would see driving innovation, because I think more people would be able to develop for those kind of things. But you know how things are.
I get it. Mr. Price, what say you?
Well, we've come a long way since the early days of the Nintendos, when you had to blow in the cartridge, ram it in, and slam it down about 3 or 4 times before the game would turn on.
Absolutely terrible for the cartridges, Matt.
Completely. Somehow it always worked. Anyway, we've come a long way since then, and I'm not really a gamer, so I don't have a lot of context on this topic. But one of the things that sticks out to me is kind of to your earlier point, Sterling, is Microsoft getting out of essentially the hardware game? Are they essentially, not completely, but are they shifting more of their focus on software? Because if they release, a phone, but pull it back, if now they're putting more emphasis on the game and allowing it to be played on multiple consoles versus focusing on their own console, where does their 5 or 10-year plan take them? Is it slowly but surely morphing into a software company only? Or do they still have a pretty rock solid hardware footprint? It's to be, TBD, depending on who you ask. I'm sure you get different opinions, but to me, like Anthony said, from just a sheer revenue standpoint, it's Apple, Android. You've got the Xbox loyals, you've got the PS whatever loyals. Imagine if you could create a game to tap into both markets. That's essentially 2x revenue right there if you could do that successfully. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of shakes out. And again, I don't have a ton of background or context from the gaming world, but to me, that's what it sounds like it's being driven by. Back to Anthony's point, it's just trying to do a little bit more land grab on potential revenue, by bringing it more open source, if you will, to multiple different consoles. But, I look at Anthony, you'll know this. What was that preview that we just watched a month or so ago? Was that Grand Theft, the new Grand
Yeah,
Theft?
Grand Theft Auto 6,
I
Florida
mean,
edition.
just the level that we're getting to in games. Yeah, I almost wonder if we've gone too far because people get lost in the game, and feel like it's real life. And I remember, I mean, Super Nintendo, come on now. There's no mistaking this is a game. You're sitting there with two buttons and driving Mario around the levels. Nowadays, you're like, in the moment in some of these games. So I almost wonder, are we past the point of no return with just reality, making the game so crazy.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I would love to think all of this stuff is done for, the pleasure and bringing things together and also, having a better solution at the end. But to Anthony's point, it's probably just all about money.
I mean, gaming is the great unifier, right? Like everyone can play, well, obviously it costs a little bit of money, but for the most part, it's something you can get together and do with other people. You can go stream on Twitch, you can do whatever you want. So there is like this nice, wholesome thing about it. And, interestingly enough, the two top selling games that have come out this year are both independent, not studio produced. So there is some hope for some unique ideas coming soon, but
to give you guys some idea on my age. So when I was big into gaming, we had a game called Descent, which was a flight simulator game. And this was the days pre-internet where you would do direct modem to modem connections with your buddies and do head-to-head Descent levels where there's literally just you and them. So whoever had the faster modem, if it was 33.6, 56K, one of those two variables really did matter back in the day. I mean, half the time I would be shot before I even realized he was in the room. And, you got that. And then, Vibes made a comment in the chat about PS2. PS2 was my college days. We had NCAA football that was, to your point, Anthony, everybody gathered around. It was a unifier. It was kind of like a social event that we would do to play football back and forth. The only part of this gaming ecosystem world that I just don't get is the streaming part and the people that watch the streams. I don't want to watch somebody game. I want a game if I'm a gamer. I've never really grasped that, but there's this huge audience for it. They make tons of money, streaming their gameplay. And I guess I just can't. Maybe I'm too old. I guess I can't relate to that.
It's a younger generations thing, Matt. I'd rather play as well, but I know that it is absolutely huge out there. I love watching the speed run tournaments where they'll quickly play through old games. Just a cool world. Well,
speaking of playing,
yeah, hit us up, Matt.
I figured I would just roll right into this. I thought that was a good segue. So we've been talking about, have we gone too far with gaming? Have we gone too far with the EV revolution? Now, full disclosure, I've had two Teslas. I enjoy Teslas. I like them. I like, what they're about with all the tech. And certainly if you appreciate technology, there's a lot that goes on, in Teslas. And now, not to say all the other EVs aren't right there on par, but certainly Tesla has led the pack for so many years. I mean, having so much functionality and control in the car, but you're on pavement. Worst case scenario, if your car gives out, okay, you coast to the side and let's hope you don't, have a fire or anything. I'm a little bit worried that we've gone too far because I saw this a couple years ago, actually. This isn't new. Something about kilowatts and water to me don't sound like a good idea. And when I came across this ride the current, my brain is like, okay, you couldn't come up with any better tagline because this sounds like ride the lightning. This is exactly what I see when I read that tagline.
That's tough.
You're sitting out there on the water in an electric powered wave runner. Okay. I have to say in my book, this is something, no matter the cost, I would never own this piece of equipment. Give me the OG 2-stroke, the thing you had to mix the oil and it smoked everywhere at the boat launch. I'll take that all day over something like this. I love y'all's thoughts on this one.
They're even plugging it in the wall. Look at that. I mean, even the video shows. I mean, honestly, that is a little disturbing. I'm sure it's safe. I'm telling you,
it's got to be safe.
I'm sure it's safe. But literally, they're plugging in the current directly in the. Okay, I'm going to practice brevity here, gentlemen. Can we stop the EV revolution? I don't think so. EV the world. I think it's going to end up everywhere. Do I think there are going to be some tough lessons along the way? Unfortunately, so.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I feel like we're trying to go so fast on full electric vehicles, what was it, a wave runner? I know it's not a jet ski. Jet ski's a brand, a wave runner. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I love the initiative. I love the concept and the fact that we want to be more electric, but I would love to see more innovation just in how we store energy and recall it before we pioneer the electric Sea-Doo, right? Like, like I think we have to get one before we get the other. I saw just a year ago, there's a new patent out there to store energy inside of carbon fiber. So if you made a wing of a plane out of carbon fiber, you could basically, that turns into a battery, right? Awesome. So like, there are patents and there are people who are really innovating the way that we could handle this electricity beyond just the lithium ion batteries, which are just terrible for the environment and they catch on fire. And I talked about, last week, my little drones I used to fly that could suck 4 cell phone batteries in less than 15 minutes. It's just, I think we're pushing the wrong technology first. Instead of innovating on the energy side, we're iterating on the fun and the transportation and all of this. But like, I would love to see one come first and then I'm all in. Let's go full electric everything, but let's figure out how to make it super economic and not going to blow up in our pockets or catch on fire or just destroy our environment.
Would you rather have choice or simplicity in what you just said? At the end game, when we're ready to EV the world, do you want to have one solution that just always does what it does for that particular thing? Or do you want to have,
I mean, speaking of simplicity, the whole idea of electric cars is there's different chargers out there now. Again, with a fuel car, you go to a gas station and you get your, your premium, your standard, your whatever gas, but it all comes from one pump that fits into your car. We've complicated everything by, we have to have different phone chargers. We have to have different car chargers. You can only charge at these stations and these ones cost money. And these ones it's complexity overload. And again, we should have thought about the infrastructure and the protocols before we went and just built it because we could.
I completely agree. And I was thinking of that very thing when you were talking. It's like, sadly, I have to say Tesla came first. And you would have thought that these other big manufacturers would have negotiated some sort of arrangement, to use their supercharger network rather than completely branching off and doing the J1772 plug or whatever it is, which arguably is universal on every other EV that's not a Tesla. It's like you have the standard plug, but to your point, is supercharging free? Do you have to pay over here? How fast is this charger? And I was just looking at some of these stats and it's like level 2 charging is typically what people have in their garage, that have EVs.
Right.
So if this is the case, this thing takes almost 4 hours to charge up once it's empty.
Wow.
I would assume their hope is marinas and harbors, and places like that on the water would deploy level 3 chargers for folks like this, where they could maybe pull up, charge at lunch, go get a bite to eat, and go play the rest of the afternoon. But if you only get 2 hours of runtime, let's remember range anxiety when you're on the road is one thing, but worst case scenario, you pull off, you call a tow truck, whatever. And I know there's things like Ceto out there, but if you run out in the middle of a lake, or God forbid, worse, maybe you're jet skiing in the waves of the ocean and you get pulled out, then what? So it's like, I think there's a lot of, to your point, we've pushed the technology too fast before the technology was really explored. And I think once we have that perfected, I think then maybe it makes sense. But just to kind of summarize, I just couldn't get past the point when I came across this. I'm like, for 42 years of my life, I've always been told electricity and water don't go together.
They don't mix.
And here we are with, let's plug in our jet ski on the water.
And now we're just trying to shove EV into every single conversation we have. We are seeing some people bow out, and as Vibes brought up as well. Apple's out. Maybe that could be a larger sort of understanding. To Anthony's point, that we really have to look at some of these use cases and look at some of the unification of some of the processes as well.
I mean, even Toyota has openly delayed the launch of their electric vehicles because they understand that the technology still needed more work and they want to spend time innovating before they just put out the expected.
Yeah.
I do have good news though.
Oh, you do? Go ahead.
I do. I do. So usually I'm bad news Tony when I come on this show. But since we're focused on simplicity this week, I actually found something I think y'all are gonna love. You ready for this?
Yes.
Okay. So, how NASA uses simpler technology to track lunar missions. Are you ready for just the best news on the planet? So everyone knows we're going back to the moon. This was actually published February 13th on NASA's website. How they track where things go, because apparently it is very easy to lose things when you send it to the moon. It's just signal delay, the time it takes to get from point to point, and just keep track of everything. They've created, you can see in the video. I recommend watching the video on your own time, but if you just look at this, it's a little puck, super small, 2 inches in total. It receives lasers and reflects them perfectly back to the location which they came from. Wow. They said, rather than going whole ham on building technology or trying to create some newfangled GPS in space, let's just do what we know works. Let's go old school. We're going to create this perfect little disc. We can shine a laser on it. It'll shine right back at us. And we can easily see exactly where the objects are. And I just love this because it is simplicity defined. Like, rather than reinvent the wheel, NASA just said, we're going to do what we've always done. We're going to make sure we have the right tool for the right challenge and leverage something they already knew how to do and perfected it with this little puck design. Super cool. I'm just curious, like, what y'all thought about this. And I thought it was perfect for our month of simplicity.
I'm sort of blown away here, man. I mean, I'm just kind of I will definitely follow up and watch that video. I just think it's so awesome. The act of simplicity, sometimes you don't need more for less. And they really solve the solution that isn't over engineered. If something goes wrong, they know how to fix it. They know how to, I mean, when you think about even things of our everyday lives, of where we live, we're talking data, we're talking about making it simple. We're talking about, I mean, this is really interesting to me. I love the fact that they're going low tech in a world where everything is lauded for going higher and higher tech.
Yep.
So I love this. This is great. The whole time you're talking, I was sitting here, laughing inside, because I'm always a person who loves sci-fi, and I love, potentially conspiracy theories and all this type of stuff, which we won't go into here. But it's like, when you said, let's not reinvent the wheel, in this context, I'm sitting here scratching my head like, was the wheel ever actually invented for this? Because if we did this in the 60s, I just sit here and scratch my head. Here it is, 2024, and they're having to solve this problem on how not to lose stuff going to this giant rock that we can see with a naked eye, or even see the craters just walking out your front porch. So I'm sitting here scratching my head like, I love the simplicity, but what on earth did they have, half a century ago that somehow worked, that we put on the shelf this whole time? So
well, that's the thing. They didn't. So they would lose stuff, and they would, lose contact with astronauts if they lost the radio signals. Like, it wasn't great, right? Back in the 60s, there was no visibility because we just didn't have the kind of way to monitor that.
Right.
By not reinventing the wheel, they literally used the same technology that road surveyors used. Like, that's what I meant when I said that. And they go over it in the video. Like, they're taking the same, when you're driving down the street and you see road surveyors who are lining up their little lasers to measure distance. That's exactly what they've done. They've just made it for space. And I love that. It's the perfect fit for a very unique problem.
I love it.
Couldn't they just talk with Starlink? Doesn't Elon have like 132 satellites up there now?
Well, I don't know if they're not pointed at the moon, then it's a whole new game. We have to get satellites around the moon, and I'm not a space expert, so I've got more reading to do, but I just love this.
You know what?
I'm just glad we're trying to go back.
Me too. Matter of fact, I may take this as a personal theme for the week. Every problem I have to solve, I'm going to try to do it simply first before then I go to the more complex architected decisions, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep. I know exactly what you're saying. And, speaking of keeping it simple, I'm going to do a little plug for myself here. I just published a blog. Oh, it showed up in the upper left-hand corner. So if you're looking at Matt over there, look at Matt over there, scan that. That little tiny QR code, it's the size of a peanut, is a link to my blog on simplicity and technology, and specifically how simplicity can help equal security when it comes to technology. A lot of times we over-rotate on complexity and trying to do things ourselves instead of going the simple route, making things easier, locking things down, removing access. All of that can actually equal more security as well and less time spent doing the job that you might not have been paid to do, but have taken on because no one else is going to do it.
Yeah, that's super important, in today's world, Anthony. And one of the things I probably have mentioned this on previous streams in 23 when we were doing this, but that's one of the things when we were redesigning the VMCA course at Veeam, which is their certified architect course. That was a real important philosophy to live by when you're talking about how to size, how to deploy. And I've mentioned this before, I know, because it's coming to memory now. It's like, just because you can deploy all these different components like in VMland doesn't mean you should. Because when you do that, you're opening up potentially additional ingress points, additional vulnerability points that you have to secure. So it's use the least amount of complexity possible to achieve the task is automatically going to be more secure, right? Just by design.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly it. And, another shameless plug, if you don't want to read the blog, definitely check out our Box to Backup video series where Matt and I go through the entire setup of our simple solution, OOPB by Object First. Yep. It's literally 15 minutes. So if you're in the market for storage for Veeam, perhaps you want the best storage for Veeam. Well, I got good news for you. It's incredibly simple, and we show you just how easy it is. So check out our series if you're on YouTube already after the stream. If not, scan that QR code and you'll get right to it. Gentlemen, any closing thoughts today on all the things we talked about?
I just love the idea that we live in a world where we actually can consider simplicity now. Just like the high-res games we talked about, cars that actually do all these other things, watercraft, all these things that sometimes the most powerful solutions we need in our life are sometimes more of the simplistic ones to kind of implement. So I just really love that idea of that. And like I said, that's going to be my mantra for the week.
I love it, Sterling. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I would say I want to throw up and highlight Dwayne's point, because this is a really good point as well. It's like, just because you've deployed something and you think you've got all your checks and balances in place, don't just assume that never needs to be audited. And do some sort of pressure and stress test on it to make sure it is secure. That's a really good call out, is don't just set it and forget it, because things change. Things quit working, things that you hadn't planned for and adjustments that need to be made. So make sure that you have some sort of security checklist and audit schedule where you're actually going through it periodically, not just around backup, but just at large across your entire organization. But certainly focusing on your data is critical on the production side and the backup side. So definitely always keep that in mind. I'm super stoked to hear that we're going back to the moon. I'm going to have to go research the lasers. That's going to be a really cool thing to watch. And yeah, I mean, for me, that's it. I think there's a lot of the fun thing about this, Anthony, is there's always great topics we can bring, because technology, I mean, if you just look at it over the past 20 years, is just going crazy with all the different, AI and machine learning and augmented reality and all this stuff. I mean, electric watercraft and all kinds of things. So I can't wait to see what we got next week.
Agreed. Yep. And if anybody out there is watching or listening, you have an idea you want us to cover or kind of talk about, definitely give us a shout. We'll go ahead and highlight that and maybe give yourself a chance to highlight your points as well.
I love it, Sterling. Yeah, you can hit any of us up on LinkedIn. All of our names are right in the stream: Anthony Cusimano, Matt Price, Sterling Wilson, and we would love to take on your topics. So send those our way as well, please. And I think that wraps up another episode of Zero Gravity. Speaking of going back to the moon, let's talk about, the zero gravity they're going to experience as soon as they leave our atmosphere. So until we get there, stay weightless, stay frictionless, stay zero gravity. We'll see you next week.